You are lying in bed, drifting off to sleep. The room is quiet. Without thinking, you shift your position, and your bare foot slips out from under the blankets, hanging exposed over the edge of the mattress. Instantly, your heart rate spikes. A sudden surge of adrenaline forces you to jerk your leg back under the covers. Your body has just registered a life-threatening emergency. We usually brush this off as a personal quirk. We do the same thing when we feel a sudden wave of dread standing in an empty room, or when we look at history and see that almost every ancient culture independently wrote stories about giant, scaly monsters. We call it superstition. We call it folklore. But these reactions are heavily documented biological processes. They are evidence of ancient survival software that is still running in the background of our modern hardware. Over millions of years, the human brain developed a hyper-vigilant threat detection system. If your ancestors heard a twig snap in the dark and assumed it was the wind, they might get eaten by a predator. If they assumed it was a predator and ran away, they survived. Evolution favored the deeply paranoid. Today, you live in a secure environment, but that ancient alarm system is still wired into your nervous system. Occasionally, it misinterprets safe, modern surroundings, conjuring monsters out of thin air and triggering physical panic to ensure you survive a threat that doesn't actually exist. Consider the dragon. Civilizations separated by impassable oceans and vast mountain ranges, cultures that had absolutely no contact with one another, all managed to invent the exact same mythical beast. For thousands of years, long before the science of paleontology existed, humans were walking across arid landscapes and discovering massive fossilized bones that had eroded out of the ground. This image displays the skeletal structure of a Columbian mammoth. Without a scientific framework to categorize these colossal ribs and enormous curving tusks, our ancestors had to rely on the only reference material they possessed, their own hardwired fear of predators. The human brain synthesized a composite nightmare. It looked at these alien bones and naturally overlaid the traits of the animals that historically hunted primates. It combined the scaled bodies of venomous serpents, the striking talons of raptors, and the fangs of large predatory cats to create a single, ultimate threat. We still do this today. When filmmakers design monsters to scare us, they exploit these exact same primal triggers. The terrifying xenomorph in the movie Aliens is a direct visual match to Phronema, a real-world deep-sea parasite that strips the flesh off its prey. Our brains instantly recognize the predatory shape and sound the alarm. In ancient times, this biological response was so profound that communities codified the fear into their culture. They painted these chimeras on cathedral walls and carved them into jade, building entire mythologies around the bones they found in the dirt. The dragon is a survival template. It is a psychological safeguard that humans mapped onto the physical evidence of the earth to make sense of a dangerous world. This is the architectural floor plan of a 14th century cellar in Coventry, England. For years, tourists and staff entering this specific room consistently reported intense feelings of dread, sudden cold chills, and the distinct sensation of a ghostly apparition watching them from the corner. Witnesses experienced classic physiological signs of panic. Their posture froze, their skin turned ashen, and the hairs on their arms stood straight up. The body was physically preparing to fight or flee, but the room appeared completely empty. This graph shows an analysis of the ambient background noise inside that very cellar. The massive spike right here represents a standing acoustic wave, measuring exactly 19 hertz. This is infrasound, a low-frequency vibration powerful enough for the human body to feel. At precisely 18.9 hertz, these sound waves actually match the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. When you stand in a room vibrating at this pitch, your eyes physically vibrate in their sockets. This mechanical distortion blurs the edges of your vision, creating gray, shifting shapes in your periphery. Your nervous system registers the intense physical vibration in your chest and the visual anomalies in your eyes, and it hits the panic button. But because there is no audible sound or visible predator to blame, the brain attempts to rationalize the dread by inventing a presence in the room. Witnesses are experiencing the brain's attempt to rationalize a violent physical reaction to silent, invisible environmental forces. Which brings us back to your foot hanging off the edge of the mattress. Why does a stray ankle in an empty bedroom warrant a full biological emergency response? For the vast majority of human history, we slept outside on the ground or in crude shelters with thin walls. In the wild, predators target extremities and the neck because they are the easiest points of access. A limb extending away from the core of the body is a tactical vulnerability. Even when you are completely exhausted, your brain runs a quiet night watch. Sleep researchers have documented a phenomenon known as the first night effect. When you sleep in an unfamiliar environment, your brain enters an asymmetric state. One hemisphere rests deeply, while the other hemisphere remains partially alert, standing guard against potential threats. Your hands and feet are fast thermal radiators. When your foot slips out from under the heavy blankets, its surface temperature drops rapidly. To that watchful half of your brain, a sudden drop in temperature signals that the limb is exposed, uncovered, and vulnerable to attack. The terrifying feeling of a monster under the bed is just your primal alert system functioning exactly as intended, demanding that you curl, cover, and tuck your body into a defensible position. Every irrational nighttime anxiety and ghost story stands as evidence of a highly effective, deeply resilient biological system. Your ancestors survived harsh, unforgiving environments precisely because they possessed brains that aggressively mapped meaning onto empty spaces and assumed the worst about things they couldn't see. You don't need to feel silly the next time you race up the basement stairs in the dark or snatch your arm back under the duvet. That surge of adrenaline is the product of millions of years of human evolution, successfully executing its primary directive. Your internal threat detector doesn't know that you have deadbolts on your doors and memory foam on your bed. It just knows that the world is dark, and it is going to stand guard to ensure you make it to morning. The human brain's incredible capacity to protect us remains absolute, standing guard long after the lights go out.